Hello. I think a lot of us don't trust you. There is a lack of trust. We've had over 700 days of an emergency that Governor Little keeps putting and adding on and adding on. Who has the strength and the courage to end this? Because a lot of the mandates and everything else ride on this.
Thank you for welcoming me late. I'm sorry about that. There are a lot of different aspects to this universal complaint. The first is to recognize that Idaho is not the most locked down state. Recognize that there are some freedoms, especially here in Idaho, where we've just ignored the mask mandates and the rest of it. The courage aspect of it, I think, is just it's a meme that is not recognizing that there are some people in Boise that just disagree with the perspective that mask mandates are of no value. Masks don't help. The jab is not doing anything. It's causing problems. What the hospitals or fighters are requiring are insane. We think they're insane because we're from the north. Many people in the southeast don't agree. So it's not just a matter of courage, it's also recognizing that people do disagree. Now, the power issue. One of the things that blows my mind is that leadership has no vision. They don't recognize, or they're not concerned about the ramifications of what is going on. Mandates for Medicare and Medicaid recipients. If you're getting federal money, then you have to take their strings with them. Well, that's been normal for decades. What's new about that? We have got to figure out a way around that. It's not a courage issue, it's working around that. But without the cooperation of leadership, who for some reason, or call it politics, call it a disagreement, for some reason are not allowing those things. What do? We introduced 29 anti-mandate legislation in the special session last year. What did they think we were going to just forget that? And yet we came back with similar legislation that was blocked every step of the way, and is still being blocked. It's fascinating to me to see how leadership has been able to manipulate and keep bills, not us individually, but the bills from coming to the fore, or to water them down before they get to the floor. So it's just, I understand the frustration because I myself am frustrated. But to accuse us of not having the courage is just to misunderstand the dynamics of what goes on down there in the difference between what the Senate is doing and what the House is doing, and then what leadership is doing, whether it's machinations for running for office this year or total disagreement with what the conservative mindset is trying to do. So I hope that at least begins to address that, and maybe is grist for the mill for some of the others.
Yeah, and building on what he said, if those of you who watch these things, in November 15th last year, we went down there. A number of us were trying to get back into session. We recessed last year. Instead of adjourning sine die in the House, the Senate did adjourn sine die. And it was because a number of us feared just exactly what was going to happen when the president came and made his mandate for vaccinations for businesses with 100 employees and things. We finally did get back there, and there were, as the representative said, 29 bills on the House side, and that's, you're going against the system, you're going against a lot of things. There's a lot of courage down there. There's no shortage of courage with some people, and so there are a number of us that are truly trying. Out of those 29 bills, I believe 7 were heard in the House. Some were sent to committee where the chairman wasn't present, so they were not going to be heard at all. Mine was one of 3 that did go to the Senate. And the committee did not even make a motion on it. It didn't go anywhere. I didn't introduce it this year because the Supreme Court decision, which was a split decision in my opinion, where they said that the government was entitled to require hospitals in various places that took Medicaid, federal money, that they could require them to be vaccinated. That was a bad decision in my opinion. 5-4, one vote the other way, it would have been different, but so we're faced with that. So that particular decision pretty much made my bill impossible to enforce anymore. So there are a group of us that are meeting. Oh. There are a group of us that are meeting every afternoon at 3 o'clock. Representative Barbieri is also part of that. And we're trying to find things that we can do, and we're just trying to take little bites of the apple, because there's legislation proposed that would wipe out the ability for the governor to mandate for the different things, but they're not going to go anywhere. So we've got a couple introduced, and we're trying to move forward on that, but it's not easy. But I can tell you there's a lot of courage, a lot of people that are trying to do what they can do, right? And as the representative said, it is frustrating because some of us, it's so clear, we see what we need to do, we need to preserve freedom. I will point out that, excuse me, and I brought this up in my presentations on the bill that I carried in November, people don't seem to understand freedom of conscience in this country anymore. That's liberty. There's a difference between freedom and liberty. Freedom is largely defined by private property rights. If you own property, you can dispose of it. Slaves couldn't own property, so they had no freedom. Liberty is different. That's what brought the Pilgrims over here. That is freedom of conscience. And so what we had in some of these bills, we're trying to say, we'll force the government to listen to people's religious complaints, and they wanted a religious exemption from this. We should not have to ask for that. If you look, I have it here. The First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion, the freedom of conscience, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. That is liberty, that's freedom of conscience. If you don't know what your rights and freedoms are, you will not know what they're being taken away. That's why education is such a big concern to many of us down there. But anyway, we are trying. I can tell you there's a group that are trying. We're doing what we can. It's not easy.
I just wanted to add one thing. Many of you think that the Senate is the problem.
Yeah.
No, I'm just going to address what the elephant in the room is. The Senate is not the problem. There are people in some leadership positions, 1 or 2 in the Senate, that are part of the problem.
Names?
I'm not going to say names. You all know who they are. So what I'm saying to you is there are particular people in the chairmanships of certain committees that are beholden either to the governor or to other leadership members, and they are willing to hold bills against the will of their committee and against the will of the whole Senate. So I just want you to know that as the House is describing the situation, it is not that we lack courage, it is the procedural differences in how the chairmen hold the bills, and that happens on both sides, House and Senate. I could name names on the House side as well of chairmen that do this.
Do it.
In response to leadership. But what we are talking about here is about the ability of these bills to be heard. And I wanted just to clarify to you that in November, when we had that 3-day session, we were as frustrated and angry as you were, because we got to vote on absolutely nothing. Nothing came to the Senate floor, nothing. We sat there for 3 days, and all we could do was say, that I'm here. Yes, I'm here. It was the roll call. That's the only thing we got to do, because the system blocked it. What we have to do is the House and the Senate have to elect different leadership for their bodies and change the rules. And we need to get leadership in our state that will be responsive and empower legislators that are duly elected by the people in their districts.
I would like to go back 1 year even further when the legislature met and we had 2 sets of governor emergency orders. One had to do with natural disasters like forest fires, floods, severe weather, that sort of thing, and the other involved insurrection, civil disobedience, those sorts of things. So there were 2 sets of statutes that dictated where the governor could call a state of emergency. The House and the Senate both passed legislation limiting the governor's powers. Both chambers passed that legislation with a veto-proof majority. Now, in order to override a governor's veto, you have to have a 2/3 vote in both chambers to do that. We had those votes, passed the House, Senate with that veto-proof majority, went to the governor. Obviously, he didn't want his power to be clipped. He vetoed it, it came back to the House, we overrode the veto, went to the Senate, and I'm embarrassed to tell you, ashamed to tell you actually, that 5 Republicans flipped their votes, and we lost both of those bills by exactly 1 vote, Republican vote, okay? You can look it up, I can help you look it up, I'm not gonna castigate people right here. In addition to that, we may not have had the issue because the statute clearly states, in my opinion, I went through college, I studied English. English is my first language, so I don't have a handicap there. The statute says the governor has the power to declare an emergency for 30 days and then can extend it for another 30 days for a total of how many? 60 days. I have on tape, and it's available publicly, where the Attorney General says the governor was well within his rights because the statute does not say that he specifically cannot re-up the state of emergency for exactly the same issue for another 60 days and 60 days. We're in over 700 days of a so-called emergency because of the Attorney General's interpretation and support of the governor. We need a strong Attorney General coming around.
And I'll just make one quick comment, because I know we have a lot of things to discuss and a lot more questions, but there are, one of the problems is that there are different types of emergencies that can be claimed by different departments and levels of government all over the place. And we have collectively done a lot to try to end some of those things. And one of the places where we were successful was, I don't know if any of you remember the governor's stages of reopening, the stay healthy orders. This was the language that went out saying that no gatherings more than 50 people, stay a distance apart, do these types of things, and they were issued as orders under the reference to the Constitution as well as the powers of the Director of Health and Welfare. Well, once digging into those statutes about the powers to actually do what was in those stages of reopening, there was no connection between the statutory authority and what was actually being stated there. So I did a lot of work, and a lot of other folks on this, the tables here, helped push this along to say that we had to have better definitions for what quarantine means. We had no definition for what isolation means, and the current statute was misdefining actually what quarantine is, and all of that needed to be cleaned up. And so a lot of work went into redoing that, and once we knew we were on solid ground, the governor's office knew that, yeah, they were trying to work one, and we were changing the statute. So the same day that it got voted on and passed out of the Senate, the order was changed to recommendations as opposed to a decree that you shall not gather. And it was, we recommend that you don't do that, and it wasn't citing any statutory authority. We passed it, the House passed it, the governor signed it, and that, in essence, eliminated the ability for a lot of the things that we think about under these broader and more complex emergency orders that lifted a lot of the things that we found very restrictive in the first part. They became recommendations. They were still being framed as, you have to do this, but if you actually read it, it was just a recommendation, because we pointed out and changed that there was not the governmental authority to say that you cannot gather, you cannot get together, you cannot do these things, businesses cannot be closed. And once we changed that, while it didn't change some of the formal declarations of emergency that government likes to, frame on top of things. It did change the nature of what we as citizens were no longer being able to be forced into doing. And so we have to just keep working those things, because there is no one overarching emergency that we can either choose to keep in place or repeal. It is pulling off these things piece by piece everywhere we can. We're gonna lose some of the fights, as we saw, by one vote, and some of them we're gonna win. But those of us that are up here are largely dedicated to keep trying to find those places where we can make sure that we are cleaning up language, we're protecting those freedoms, we're making sure that our job is to make sure that you aren't given those restrictions by the government. It's up to you, and we're up here just to make sure that you maintain that liberty.
I'd like to just follow up to answer the question of the lady. Once those two bills got vetoed, the House did not give up. Instead of an omnibus set of bills that restricted the governor's powers, we sliced and diced them and put into place House Bill 391, 392, and 393. And don't quote me on the order, but the first one was, the governor shall not infringe on the US and Idaho constitutions. That was vetoed in the original omnibus bill. The second of those bills was, he cannot call people arbitrarily essential or non-essential. How many small business owners do we have here that might have even gone under, all right? And the third one was that the governor would not violate state laws. So all three of those things had been violated, and we got those successfully passed as individuals. The fourth one would have been, the governor cannot specifically re-up the state of emergency for more than 60 days for the same issue without consent of the legislature. And it was so far into the legislative session at that point that we just ran out of time and steam. So we did get the first three passed, House, Senate, and the governor. How can the governor veto a statute that says he cannot violate the Constitution? I mean, that would be political suicide. So we did our best. Thank you.
I would like to follow up on what Tony just said. The Senate bill was vetoed as well by the governor, as you heard, and we lost the override by one vote of people in our body. However, we brought that back. We changed one little thing. From 60 days to 90 days, the governor can keep the state of emergency, with the caveat that he cannot be imposing any personal restrictions on people or businesses during that time frame. It was only set up for the FEMA funding to continue for whatever the disaster or emergency is. So that was also passed through again and signed by the governor. It is in law, just like the three House bill emergency powers law are. And in that bill, it includes all the same language that was with the House, because the House and the Senate worked together on the language to protect individual rights. It says specifically, all businesses and all people are declared essential, even during any disaster or emergency. It says that you cannot impose personal restrictions on people, and you cannot quarantine or isolate unless you have proven that they are contagious with something that is going to, and only those people that are proven to be contagious can be isolated, and only for a very limited amount of time. And it gives them a legal opportunity to go to court and have a legal standing if that time is exceeded. There's a lot of detail in the bills. You can go back. I don't remember the number, but Peter probably does. And we have worked very hard for what the freedoms that we have in Idaho, to keep them and to keep them from being infringed upon. But what I want you to know is that the media is not our friend. This might come as a shock to you. So what the media chooses to print is that the emergency bills were vetoed by the governor. End of story for them. They didn't tell you that we came back and got them through and into law. And I'm shocked at how many people don't know that, because the media did not tell that side of the story, because it was a success story for both the Senate and the House, and we are protecting your rights.
Next question.
Are you finished?